Kathleen Maley is Vice President for Analytics Products for Experian Decision Analytics North America, where she leverages close to 20 years of deep expertise in business intelligence, analytics, predictive modeling, and machine learning to maximize the impact of business-centered analytical solutions. The title of her talk is Setting a Foundation for Analytics as a Business Utility and Loving My Job. Please welcome Kathleen Maley.
Thank you. I want to start by emphasizing the close to 20 years. It's not quite 20 years. I'm not ready to be that old yet. I tell my kids all the time to stop growing, and I wish I could do that myself. I am going to talk really mainly about three things today, and I am a person who has worked primarily in companies that don't have analytics products as the product itself. The focus of the company is not an analytics product. The focus of the company is something else. And my job within those companies has been to make data and analytics relevant and, more important, to impact the bottom line. Right? So I have always been part of a support function. And that has colored very significantly the way I have approached my job. And so this is really a talk meant for people who are working inside a company trying to make their data relevant. That could even be a tech company or a digital-first company. But trying to do the work of data and analytics on behalf of the business, where analytics is not the product itself. So how do we set context, and what's the importance of context in answering business questions? The fact that analytics is a verb, not a noun. It's a very, very active discipline. It's a very active practice. It isn't data itself isn't the value of analytics. Data is the input to that. And finally, it takes two to tango. One of the things that I have learned over the course of those close to 20 years is that analytics in a silo can produce almost nothing, no value. The value of analytics, when it's a utility used within an organization that has some other primary output, it requires that partnership with a business leader. So I heard Peter earlier say in the Vizu presentation, who is presenting to business partners? They have a very, very active role in this as well. If analytics is going to produce value, they have a very active role to play. So I'm going to talk about those three things. I am asked, and I take this as a compliment, are you one of us or one of them? And I get that question from the data scientists I work with and the analysts I work with. I also get that question from the business leaders I work with. And I consider that a good thing. I've been doing this for long enough that I've had a foot in both worlds. I actually started, well, in my day, we didn't call us data scientists. We called us statisticians. And then I went to a place where they called us quants. I don't know if anybody is old enough to remember that. A few people, right? And now we're called data scientists. So I attribute this to the consultants who have something to sell over and over and over. But it's really the same stuff. So that is my background. I started in banking. Most of my working career has been in banking. I now work for one of the bureaus. I work for Experian. I started in risk modeling, but I've managed every analytics vertical you can think of. So I've managed and supported every business partner you can think of. If it's a product, if it's an acquisition channel or a servicing channel. I've managed pricing. I've worked in predictive modeling. I've worked in optimization. I've managed BI teams. But at some point in my career, the focus had to become not just the work I was doing as an analyst, but how I could actually improve the company's bottom line and how I could help the business leaders absorb and take advantage of this very, very valuable skill set that we have that they don't understand at all. I was joking with Maggie Hayes earlier, and Maggie's doing a presentation later this afternoon. She and I used to work together, and we were joking that so many of the business partners we support literally do not know the difference between what a data analyst does and what a data engineer does. They just figure it's all the same. If you use Python, you're just part of that group of people. But that's not entirely true. And so I had to find a way to make my stuff relevant. I didn't want to be frustrated in my job. I didn't want people telling me that, questioning, like, why do we have this investment in data and analytics? What are you guys even producing? I wanted to get away from that. I wanted to be in a place where I could be really seen as valuable. So this is where it all begins. And this was the example that completely changed my mindset and my approach to this work that I do. Right? Hey, Kathleen, can you get me the data that shows that I've had this positive impact on client experience? And my favorite, it should be really easy, I just need the data. I don't know if any of you have ever heard that. Like you're working with someone, they go, no, it's really easy, I just need you to get me the data. And sometimes they even add on to the end, and this is what I really love, I'll do the analysis. As if like the analysis is the easy part, right? And so this was where it started. This was my example. A guy came to me and he said, hey, Kathleen, I need this data. I've done this thing in contact center. I need to show that it's had a positive impact on client experience. Now, when I first started my career, and I was only a few years in here, but I was trained the way many of us are. When your business partner asks for data, you get the data and you give it to them. And had I done that, here's your data, he would have said, great, let's spend another $7 million on this pet project of mine, right? That's what he would have done. Because he was absolutely sure that if there was a positive impact, it obviously was attributed to whatever it was he had done, right? He knew it worked, he just needed the data. He wasn't doing anything nefarious, he wasn't trying to fake results. He was convinced of it, and he wanted to go and ask for more money. But that's not what happened, because this guy made the mistake of giving me a little bit more information. He didn't just say, Kathleen, get me this data from this time period and position it in this way, present it in this way. He said, I did something in the contact center. I expect there to be an improvement in client satisfaction. And I was curious, and I started asking some questions. What did you do? Why did you do it? When did you do it? Was it staged? Was it all at once? Help me understand. Help me understand what you're really trying, what you really did, so I can get you the best answer possible, so that I can get you the data on the first try. Because that's the other thing. When we say, here's your data, they look at it, they can't interpret it, and then they say, well, maybe if you cut it this way, maybe if you cut it that way, maybe if you trend it, maybe if you get this other different time period. Is this familiar to anyone? I see a few nodding heads, right? This is the problem, right, of just saying, here's your data. They don't know how to interpret the data, because actually analysis isn't quite as simple as that. They just think they need the data cut differently, and somehow this magical insight is going to just like fall out of the data onto the floor, and they'll pick it up, and it'll be $3 million. And that's just not what happens. So this guy forced me to ask some questions. And so what happened was, instead of saying, here's your data, I said, actually, I figured out what happened here. You did make a change, and it was a very, very good change, but it was driven by the way you selected your talent, not by your $7 million investment. So you can imagine now, I'm a junior analyst, I'm sitting across the table from the head of client experience for the biggest bank in the United States, and I am telling him that he wasted $7 million. Okay, that's an interesting position for a junior analyst to be in. I was very, very fortunate. I had an excellent manager at the time. He taught me how to be an analyst first, and he also taught me how to position this message and how to work with this business partner so that I could give him the message in a way that he could receive it while saving face and repositioning his ask so that he could still be seen as a hero by the organization. You know, these are very important things if I want to continue a career at that organization. And I did. I wanted to keep my job. And so it was really understanding, how do I affect a good outcome, what I believed was a right outcome, position this guy to make a better decision. I didn't have to have him be embarrassed in the process. And I'm not responsible for managing, right, his performance, right? So my job was to make sure he was able to make a better informed decision. How could I find a way to get him this information? And what's remarkable is he did change his next step. Instead of saying, oh, I want that money anyway, I don't care, I want to invest it, he was able to say, okay, great, then help me with that. How do I know who's ready to move into this new contact center? How do I know which talent is ready? How do I know what training really matters? How do I know what's next? And that led to a whole new series of very, very productive questions and some productive analysis. And it also saved the company $7 million. This was literally the example. I will also tell you a side note, and I only have 30 minutes, which is insane. I've never, ever said, I don't know how I talk for only 30 minutes. Like, it's not possible. But anyway, that manager, John Kuntz, he is still one of my best friends. And he said to me that night, we were working late, and I said, John, I know what's wrong with this analysis. And if anybody is curious, find me after, because it was just a beautiful, simple solution to what appeared to be such a complex problem. And I said, John, I know what we're missing. We need to do this instead of that. And he looks at me and he goes, oh my God, how did you see that before me? And he said to me, you will surpass me in your career. And I have. But he's still a very good friend. He's still a very, very good friend. This is where it all started. I knew somehow that getting context was critical. When I started to try and gather that context on my own, what I realized was I speak a different language than the partners I work with. And when I would ask them questions about what they were doing, why, what are you doing, what's it worth, what decision are you going to make, all of that was perceived as challenge. And so the answer I got back was, I know my strategy, I know my business better than you, just get me the data. I don't owe you any explanation, just get me the data. And I stumbled purely by accident on this magical phrase, help me understand what you are trying to achieve so I can better meet your needs. Help me, spend 15 minutes with me. Because if I know what you're after, I'm going to be able to get you an answer on the first try. I'm not going to give you the data and you're going to look at the data and not understand it and assume that you just need more data or you need different data. And we get into that loop. And so it is this question, this set of questions that are really just about starting a conversation. What are you really working on? What is your goal? I know you're asking me for this data, but what are you really trying to achieve? And when I know what they're actually trying to achieve, when I'm getting that context, all of a sudden I can do an analysis with a purpose. Providing data is not the same thing as doing an analysis. And if I don't know the purpose of my analysis, if I don't know the question I'm answering, I have absolutely no hope of providing an answer. It's just data. It's just more and more and more data. If it's a report, it becomes 2 reports or 3 reports or 10 reports that are so complicated. Now my partner is asking me for a summary report of the reports. Has anyone been in that cycle yet? A few people, yes. More data is not always a better thing. So if we want to operate as thought partners, as strategic partners, where we're literally guiding the business, not necessarily setting their strategy. At some point, I've certainly sat at tables where I've influenced strategy, used data and analytics to influence strategy. But in the beginning, it really is just, I want to be a thought partner, right? You've got all these great experts around you. You've got a finance partner, you've got a HR partner, you've got, a delivery partner, a sales partner. I'm your data and analytics partner. This is what I do. But if I'm going to do that effectively, I have to operate under this sort of collaborative engagement model. There's no way I have time to talk about all of this, but I like to provide it because, again, if you're thinking about how do I become more relevant in my organization because I don't want to be frustrated constantly, or because I want to be moved into a leadership position, or I want to be taken seriously, or I want to run my group one day because I think my boss, I think I could do better than my boss, right? Anything. This is an engagement model that I have found to be very, very effective. I'm going to focus on just a couple of things today. The consultative mindset. We've talked about the first half of that, right? Gathering the context. I'm going to talk a little bit about the definition of analytics. I just stole it off of Wikipedia. It's not mine, but I love it. Love it, love it, love it. And then the operating rhythms, a couple of operating rhythms that I have found to be very, very useful, very effective. And then that being business-minded and having a business-oriented mindset around outcomes. Nothing I do is about the data. The data is the input, not the output. And if I want to convince the leaders I work with, I can't be talking about my data, I can't be talking about my model, I can't be talking about the work I did. Nobody cares. Nobody cares, right? When I was in grad school, yeah, I had to demonstrate. This is exactly the process I followed, and I would have to prove that it was a reliable approach. My business partners don't care about that. They couldn't evaluate it if I gave them everything. They only care about, how does this affect the outcome? How does this change the money I'm going to spend? How does this change the decision I'm going to make? So gathering the context is a great start, but it is just the beginning, right? Because then we actually have to analyze the data. We've got an idea. We've got an idea of what we need to go after. So this is another one. This is just from a few years ago, actually, right? And the US was going through another government whatever, and we were going to not fund the government, and so there were going to be all sorts of problems that come as a result of that, right? Is the government going to shut us down? Are they going to stop paying their employees, essentially? And when you work at a bank, right, one of the things we look at is, can you repay your loan? Well, if your paycheck stops, you might be in trouble. So I go and I get all of my context, and I go, great, here's your 50 pages of PowerPoint. And the head of the consumer bank at the time said, so this is a lot of great data. What does it mean? Because he doesn't really care about all of that. All of that was true. All of that was interesting. But what he wanted to know is, what's the impact of the government shutdown? And if I can't answer, if I say, well, here's all of your data, I have not done my job, because my job isn't to provide the data. My job is to answer the question. This is the process that most of us learned either explicitly as students or implicitly once we joined an organization. This is the behavior that was reinforced, right? And it's all about getting the data, right? You go and you field a request, you define the question, you know what you're after, you pull the data, you summarize the data, and then you present the data. We talk about presenting data all the time. This doesn't actually lead to answering the question. The other thing that dawned on me at some point is we call ourselves analysts, many of us, but in fact, we're never taught to analyze data. At least I wasn't, right? I went to graduate school. I have an applied master's in statistics. And so I learned programming. I learned all kinds of algorithms, and thankfully, I still got the foundational statistics. So I know a lot of stuff, but nobody ever actually taught me how to look at data and interpret it. And yet that is what we are asked to do for those of us who go and work in a company or a business, or are using data and analytics on behalf of some other greater purpose or client impact. And so really the process that we need to follow is a little bit different. And I describe this as like, I basically describe my job. So I did the predictive modeling and all that. I fell in love with the analytics, the investigative analytics, right? Something changed. What changed? Why did it change? I love that stuff. It's like a mystery. It's like I've walked in on a murder scene, right? I've walked in on a murder scene and there's a dead body, and I have to figure out what the hell happened. How did the person die? Why did the person die? Who took the person down? Maybe it's a little macabre, I don't know, but that's what it makes sense to me. So as I'm looking at my data, I field the question. This is what we're trying to understand, Kathleen. Okay, great. I know what we're trying to understand. I know why it matters to you. I know some of the things that could influence it one way or another, and that helps me define the analytical plan in my brain, right? Not for them, that's the quiet part. What's my analytical plan? I define that in my brain while I'm asking questions about their business. And then I have to figure out what happened. And that means I go to the data, I follow leads. I generate my own hypothesis about what might be happening. And all of my work is to break my hypothesis. And I will break a whole lot of hypotheses before I land on the one that I can't break. And anybody who's taken statistics, you remember H naught and you remember HA. If you can't break the hypothesis right? You don't prove something true, you prove something's not true. Well, if I can't break my own hypothesis, that's probably what the answer is. And that's effectively what it is. But it means I go back to that data over and over. I probably will have to go to the partner and say, I'm finding this. Does this make sense to you? What does this mean? And that gives me the next clue to look and to see where I need to keep going. But eventually, I'm able to draw a conclusion, and I'm able to answer the question. Drawing the conclusion is where our value is. We can look at data in a way that most people cannot. It isn't just about pulling the data and summarizing the data. It's about studying the data and looking for clues in that data in a very special way. It makes us remarkably valuable. Along with this comes critical thinking, comes logic, right? If anybody loves logic puzzles, this is the right career for you. I think that's really why I love this job, because I'm constantly solving these riddles. And I will tell you, more often than not, I will see something in the data and I will take it back to the partner and I will say, I'm seeing this. You told me your process works like that, but I'm seeing this. And they go, oh yeah, I forgot. Or they say, well, yeah, but it's not supposed to be like that. It's like, okay, but it is, and I can see this. I know more about what's happening at my company than anyone because you cannot hide from data. You cannot hide from data. I love knowing all the dirty secrets, and I know them all, right? And I love it when one business partner comes to me. Again, I've worked for very large companies. So I have one business partner who comes to me and says, I want to know this about the checking product. And then I have another one who comes to me who says, I want to know about this about the credit card product. And what I find out is actually these two guys are fighting, and each of them is coming to me for data to further their debate in their position. That's kind of a fun place to be, as long as I don't get squashed in the middle. The other thing I'll say about this, because I think this is actually pretty important. Is it still on? Did I break it? Where did the thing go? I wonder if I can get away with not using it. Do you need it
live streaming?
It's a live stream. Okay, we're back. We're back. All right, this is great. So the other thing I'll take a minute to say here, and I know I'm gonna run out of time toward the end, but I think this one is really important. When I provide an answer to a business partner, it is one. Are you laughing because of the mic or because you're like, one slide is impossible? Or is it still on? I just have to hold it really close. One slide answer. If I cannot provide my answer in one slide, either I don't understand the question or I haven't finished my analysis. And this is because nobody cares what I did. Nobody cares about all the interesting things I found, and nobody cares about all of the smart things I did to reach dozens of dead ends. What they care about is the answer to the question, and then I have an obligation to provide the data that supports my conclusion. And that's really important. If I try and share with them everything, they cannot distinguish what is relevant from what is irrelevant. And my job is to distinguish between what is relevant and what is irrelevant so that they can just take the answer and move on and improve their decisions. I save those conversations about, oh my gosh, look at how elegant the solution to this problem was. Look at how creative the solution to the problem. I save those conversations to have with my teammates, not with my business partners. Because then they just lose, they're not able to appreciate it, first of all, so I'm taking it to the wrong audience, but then they also get very distracted and they wonder why they spend any time with me anyway, because I'm not really helping them. I'm just talking about stuff that they don't understand. So being able to provide an answer to a very, I don't care how complex the question is, I'm telling you, one slide. This is a really good test. You want to push your own understanding of what you're doing, try and get it down to one slide. So, data analytics isn't about the data, for us. In some cases it is. You want to be a researcher, go into academia. Absolutely, absolutely, there's a place for that. Not in my world, right? Analytics is not about the data. It's about solving a business problem, period. And this is the definition I stole off of Wikipedia. I mean, I adjusted it a little bit. Got to give it my own flair. But at the end, what I love about this is it talks about analytics, not the programming and all of that nonsense, not the statistical algorithms and all of that, right? And the machine learning. It's just about the discovery, interpretation, and communication of meaningful patterns in data. And the second part, the connective tissue between data and effective decision making. The analytics is the connective tissue between the data and the decision making. And that, for me, analytics is a verb, not a noun. The data are not the analytics. I work with so many partners, they say, Kathleen, we need some analytics. It's not a thing. I can't give you the analytics. The analysis is what I do to take that data and make it meaningful for you. It isn't giving you the data. So one of the routines, I mentioned a few routines. There are several routines that I put in place, but one I wanted to mention, because that's the other thing, is this is not a one-sided opportunity, this is a two-sided opportunity. If I'm going to do useful analytics, I have to have a business partner who will engage. And so being a part of their strategy conversations, knowing what they're working on, knowing what their priorities are. And my clock is flashing, so I'm going to take just a few more minutes. Knowing what they're working on is absolutely essential if I am going to provide a useful answer. There's an expression we use in the US, right, about take your big rocks, the order in which you fill your jar. If you have a glass jar, if you put your sand in first and then you put your big rocks around it, you can't fit all your big rocks in the jar. But if you put your big rocks in first, the sand will fit around it. This is the idea of knowing what your partners are working on, what is actually meaningful work that they are doing. Those little day-to-day requests, can you get me this data, can you get me that data, there's a fire drill, all of that, that finds a way of fitting around these big things when we know what these big things are. This only happens when I have a business partner who is willing to participate in the process with me. And that is a real cultural change. To get the partners, instead of, I'm not a service body, I'm not a call center, you don't submit a ticket for me. I'm actually a really, really valuable part of your team. And when I know what you're working on, I can provide you useful answers to meaningful questions, not just provide data without the meaning behind it, without the interpretation that really changes the way they're going to make decisions and operate. All right, I am going to have to speed up because they will kick me off the stage. This is a walk-away slide. I'm not going to go through this slide, but I'm a former teacher. I taught high school math for 7 years, and I still see myself as an educator in many ways. And I've spent 20 years making lots and lots of really, really painful mistakes. And so what I like to do with these talks now is provide some of that information so that maybe you can skip ahead a little bit further than I was able to. You know, just the idea of how do I get context from my business partner and not have it feel like a fight and have it feel like a partnership. How do I get involved in what they're doing? Instead of them saying, I've literally had business partners say, Kathleen, don't worry, I'll call you when I need data. It's like, that's not the point. That's not, you don't understand that I'm asking to participate for your benefit, not for mine, right? So building these things. So this is one, again, just a walk away slide, hopefully, that you can put into practice. The last thing I'll say, and I'll skip through this one, there's this myth, many of you have probably heard it. If you demonstrate the value of your work, then your business partners will act, right? And if your business partners aren't acting, it must be because you are not showing the value of what you're producing. So then we start and we do like a pilot program or we do a test program. We have a big idea. We do a test program. We say, if you do this thing, it's going to be worth this much. And we were told that if we did that, that we would end up producing value that they couldn't say no to. It would be so huge. And the problem is when we do this and we say, here you go, you've asked me for help on this. I've come up with a solution that will save you $6 million annually. And he says, great, that sounds good to me. And I say, who can I work with? And the answer literally is, what do you mean? What do you mean, who do I work? This is an analytics project, right? But if I'm working on a project that has to be executed by the business, all I'm doing is discovering a problem with your process. You asked me what you needed to do to change the way you're managing your business, and I gave you that information. But you having that information isn't the same thing as getting those $6 million. You actually then have to go and change your process. Believe it or not, I think this is actually a big surprise for a lot of business leaders. They literally do not know. They think analytics is this thing that happens over there, and if you are a good enough analyst, somehow your work is just going to produce value automatically without the partner doing anything. And they do not realize that they're going to have to completely upend the way they're managing their business. They're going to have to make very real process tactical changes. And so one of the things that I've learned is, okay, I can get you up to a point. I can get you to the point where I'm recommending a solution. But if the partner is not poised to ask, I have to stop. If I continue to do work that the business cannot take action on, I am wasting the company's money. I get them up to the point of a recommendation. And even if they love that recommendation in spirit, do they have the staff for it? Do they have the tech investment for it? Is this something that has to go on until next year? Is this something that has to be delayed for a few months? Is this something they're just not going to be able to take action on? But I find that out before I have built the solution, so that I can always be spending my time on the most valuable problems that the company has to answer. Because it's only valuable if the business can act on it. If the business can't act on it, it doesn't matter. The business has to be able to act on it. This also puts the ball in their court. Like, don't tell me you want more from me. I'm telling you, you have a role in this too. And it's not going to produce anything unless you, business partner, do what you're supposed to do. It gives me much more solid footing to stand on. And it positions me much more as an equal when it comes to these conversations. For me, that was always very exciting. Many of you may be feeling like, sounds good, there's no way you don't understand the people I'm working with. You don't understand the culture at my company. You have no idea. They don't get it at all. And I'm here to tell you the payoff is worth it. Not only in terms of, real ROI like this, but in terms of, in my case, the job satisfaction. It was hard. I was a junior analyst. No one around me was thinking about this work the way I was thinking about it. I am very, very fortunate to have come into this line of work in financial services when we were really just at the outset. None of us knew how to do this. I'm really one of the first generations who've had the time to learn these things through trial and error. And I started just by influencing that little circle of people around me, my counterpart on the business side. Forget about some of these larger structural organizational changes that hopefully your organization would have appetite to invest in. But I wanted to love my job. I wanted to have fun at my job. I wanted to be seen as a partner in my job. And so these were the sorts of things that helped me get there. I'm going to stop here because we are definitely out of time. I would want to encourage anyone who'd be willing to connect with me on LinkedIn. I love this stuff. I love still working with analysts. I don't get to do it as much every day. I love challenge because I get better at my job when you challenge me and you tell me that it's not true and it doesn't really work that way. And I've never, ever, ever said no to a conversation with anyone who's contacted me on LinkedIn. So I really hope some of you will do that.
Thank you for the riveting talk. Not only did you talk about dead bodies, you talked about dirty secrets, admitted to freely stealing from Wikipedia, and I don't have any tattoos, but after your talk, I feel like I need to get one, and it's going to say, help me understand what you're trying to achieve so I can help you with your needs.
Yes.
What a great takeaway, what a great talk. I think I speak for everyone when we ask, could you come and work at my company as well? We have a few minutes for questions, and some of them have been upvoted. One of them is upvoted 10 times. What do you think about growing self-serve company in terms of analytics? By this, meaning teaching business stakeholders more advanced ways of working with data.
I think it's a very interesting question, and there is so much about self-serve. Well, self-serve for what, right? And so I think there's a place for it, but I think we have to very clearly define what self-serve means. Do I want to build reports so that I don't every single month have to answer the same question about your sales or your activation rates? Or yeah, I want my business partners to be able to access that information themselves. But I don't expect them to be able to answer necessarily very complex questions that have never been asked before. Reports are excellent for feeding information about questions that have already been answered or things that we've already identified are important. But it is impossible to do investigative analytics through a report so far. I've never seen a tool that will allow investigative analytics. I think there's also, and this is why the background in statistics is so important, it isn't always easy to interpret data. It's very easy to come to wrong conclusions and to not understand the implications of looking at only partial data or not having the right benchmark to compare changes to. There's so much about it that can be complex. So I think there's absolutely a role for it, but I think it has to be clearly defined and understood.
Okay, awesome. The next most upvoted question: what's your best practice on how to educate business partners to ask better questions?
I love this question so much because they can't. They are absolutely doing the best they can do. They are absolutely doing the very best they can do. And the extent of that is, hey, Kathleen, can you get me this data? And I have learned to interpret that to mean, hey, Kathleen, I need your help with something. And they will ask me questions about the things that matter to them and their business at that moment. My job is, maybe I'll say threefold. I don't know, you'll count for me after I go through them. First is, especially with a new relationship, building credibility. And that means I can't have my opening bid be what you think is important doesn't matter. That cannot be my first reaction. My first reaction has to be, yes, I would love to help you. I will learn all kinds of crazy things as I'm looking through the data. So I'll answer their question, and then I might say, also, did you see XYZ? Or as I'm part of their staff meetings, as I'm part of these business strategy sessions, I start to hear things, and I go, I could help with that. Would it help you if I could provide you with X? And all of a sudden, we start to see a different level of interest. And all of a sudden, we start to see that they're willing to look at problems maybe they didn't even know they could be looking at. Or they will start to see things that we go, oh, there's an easy fix here. And they go, oh, I didn't even realize. So it's not about teaching them to ask better questions. It's about guiding them through the process of learning how to leverage me as their expert and learning about what data and analytics can give them. They're not allowed to touch my tools, but they're allowed to receive the benefit of my tools. And they don't even know the application of my tools yet.
Excellent. Slido is blowing up, by the way. We have time for a couple more. How do you handle and communicate inconclusive results?
So this is amazing. So the business always wants an answer. They always want an answer. I have learned that statistics is really the science of doubt. And so I talk very openly with my partners. I talk to them a lot about conceptually. And I say, look, my job is not to tell you what to do, and the data will always be imperfect. So what level of doubt are you willing to accept? Or how much value is enough to convince you that it's something to do? So I can sort of adjust my level of precision around that. And sometimes I will say, if you had a different answer than what I'm giving you, would you take a different action? And if the answer is no, it doesn't matter. So part of this is also about changing the conversation. Like, you want a certain level of precision, I get it. Do you need that level of precision? How can you get comfortable taking the next action knowing that this is the best the data can do? That's the other thing. I often will put it back on the data because it isn't me. I've done everything I can do to pull every bit of insight out of this information, but we are constrained by the data. And that's not going to change. That's not me. That's the data. So this is as much insight as exists. If you are not ready to make a decision, then you have to come up with your rationale for not making a decision based on everything you've got. So, it becomes, and I try to always position it as I want to be as helpful to you as possible. And what are the other things we can do to make you more comfortable with whatever decision you're trying to make?
I think you've been super helpful to us here. It's clear that you love your job.
I love it. I love it. I love it.
But our time is up for today, so let me present you with your gift.
Yes. This is what I've been waiting for. This is the real reason I came.
It's a hand-drawn crunch mug.
How cool is that? It looks just like me. And my favorite thing is that this headshot is about 12 years old. So I look much younger. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kathleen. One more time, please. Kathleen Maley.